What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. I think we got a great video for you today, but before we start, let's take a minute and say a thanks to our sponsors. So this week's sponsor is going out to nobody, because nobody wants to sponsor the show. So let's go ahead and get right into the video then. So nitrous oxide, what a controversial topic. I know we've all seen the movies where they open the bottle and they hit the button and it, boom, the carburetor comes flying off or the intake manifold comes off. Well, most of the time, when you know what you're doing, that's about the farthest thing from the truth. So we're going to be talking a little more about how to set up nitrous properly, what it costs, and why it's by far the best power adder for the money. So we actually run nitrous on this drag racing truck behind me, so we're going to be going over that. But let's start off with what exactly is nitrous oxide. So what exactly is nitrous oxide? Nitrous oxide is a chemical compound, N2O, 2 parts nitrogen to 1 part oxygen. This chemical compound is stored in a liquid form in the bottle, but once it's open and goes through the lines to the motor, it transitions into gas form where the nitrogen splits from the oxygen. And the whole idea is that you're introducing more oxygen into the motor than it could get naturally aspirated. Now, we all know that a motor mixes both fuel and air to create an explosion. Now, nitrous oxide does not only provide more air, given that it's 2 parts nitrogen, 1 part oxygen. But nitrous oxide is extremely cold, especially when it's introduced into the motor. Now these are just rough numbers, don't quote me exactly, but I believe the boiling point of nitrous oxide is about negative 89 degrees Celsius, so it's cold. Now the colder the air, the more dense the air is, which means the motor is going to make more horsepower. So that's the whole point of using nitrous oxide, and you'll see when you're using it and you open this bottle, it'll freeze over the tip. It'll get frost on it because it's so cold. So let's talk a little bit about why nitrous oxide is a equal, if not better option to a supercharger or a turbocharger. Not only, in my opinion, is nitrous oxide far simpler to set up, but it's also significantly cheaper than a turbocharger or supercharger. And it's a lot easier to make horsepower with than it is to make it with a supercharger or turbocharger. So let's get into the prices. Now, the basic nitrous system for a carbureted application, which is what I run, is going to run you about $500. It basically comes with everything. You might need a little bit of wiring. Now, let's kind of explain how this works. So here's your intake manifold. Here's your carburetor. And you'll see the real life examples on the truck here in just a minute. Now, in between the carburetor and the intake manifold, there's going to be a plate with a bar that is going to run perpendicular in here. And with your carburetor on here and your plate in between here, there's going to be 2 solenoids, one on each side, for nitrous and for fuel. And what that's going to do is the fuel and nitrous are going to mix together in this plate, shoot down into your intake ports, and they're going to come out your intake holes to where your motor can suck them in and use them to create more horsepower. Now, this is also very similar to how it works on EFI. Let's say you have an LS, they make a plate system. Now this plate spaces between your throttle body and your intake manifold, and it basically is the same principle. It has injectors that spray nitrous and fuel into your throttle body so you can make more power with your LS. Not as much as you're going to make with a small block Chevy, because a small block's better than an LS. We all know that, but it's pretty good also. Now, 500 is just the starting step, and those kits can make you anywhere from 25 horsepower all the way up to 250 horsepower. And if you want to add 250 horsepower with a supercharger or turbocharger, you're going to be in a lot more than that. But we'll go over a little bit more of that later. So we're going to say all in, if you already have, let's say, a basic small block Chevy. I'm not exactly sure how much the LS stuff is. I think it's relatively similar in price, but we're going to say all in, you're going to be in about $600, and you can make upwards of 250 extra horsepower. Now, one thing you're going to have to remember is that if you want to do a supercharger or turbocharger, there's going to be an immense amount of tuning that goes into that. But with nitrous, we'll show you all of this a little later when we get to the truck. But if you have your tune-up good with your carburetor or with your EFI, these kits come pre-done. So that means they already have all the jetting you're going to need for the nitrous and for the fuel. There's not a lot of brain power that goes into it. You just look at their little chart and it's going to tell you exactly what jets you need. So let's say you've already got your car dialed in. You go down the drag strip, you're 12.5 to 1 air-fuel ratio, dead on the money. You put this nitrous kit in with 100 horsepower nitrous jet and 100 horsepower fuel jet, it is going to be pretty much dead on with the same mixture as you had before. Now, keeping your tune-up safe is going to be the best way to not blow your manifold off like you see in all the movies. So, your best friend is going to be an air-fuel gauge. If you don't have an air-fuel gauge, I'm going to highly recommend you install one. The truck has one. It takes all the guesswork out of tuning up your car. You know you're doing things right. You know you're doing it safe. So I highly recommend putting in an air-fuel gauge if you're going to start running nitrous. So all in, about $650. You can make upwards of 250 horsepower. You might even be able to call whichever company you bought nitrous from. I get it from Nitrous Express, but call them and get bigger jets. I'll bet you can go all the way up to 300 horsepower with just the standard plate system. Now, there are ways to get a lot fancier. You can do direct port injection. That involves drilling out these intake manifolds and putting injectors in here. Now, a lot of you might have some questions about the fuel. How I said the nitrous does nitrous and fuel for a pre-done mixture. So you're going to have, we'll show you this on the truck, so calm down. You're going to have a fuel solenoid and a nitrous solenoid. Now, if you're running under a 200 shot, even if you're running a 250 shot, if you have a really good mechanical pump or a super high flow electronic pump, all you have to do is somewhere after the fuel pump, put a Y in your line, and you're going to run one to your fuel rail or to your carburetor like it already was. And the other side of the Y is going to go to your nitrous solenoid, and that's going to supply it fuel so that it can inject the nitrous and fuel mixture into the carburetor. Now, besides finding somewhere to mount the bottle, and then there's a little bit of wiring, it's not complicated. Trust me, if I can do it, you can do it. It's nothing special. The last thing you're going to want to make sure you do with the nitrous is that you got to keep the bottle at the right temperature. As you can see, there's a pressure gauge right here. And if the bottle is not between about 750 and 1,100 pounds of pressure in the bottle, it's not going to work right. So a lot of companies sell a bottle heater, just a blanket that wraps around. I actually just ordered one, hasn't come yet. But it's a just kind of a blanket that wraps around, it velcros, and then you wire it into your car, and you'll have a switch, and that'll keep the bottle right at the pressure you want. You'll always be ready to go, whether you're on the drag strip or on the street. So that's kind of the Nitrous 101. Now, let's take a look at a more practical example. Let's see how it actually looks on a car. So we're just gonna kind of start from the back of the truck here and work our way up. So this is gonna be where, well, you can mount your bottle wherever you want. Usually it's recommended in a trunk or something. Obviously we don't have a trunk, so it's mounted in the bed. So this is, you're gonna have your main bottle mount, just 2 clamps to hold it in. You're gonna have your main feed line, and that's gonna hook up there, and then you're gonna run it under the car, through the car, whatever makes you happy. Now, in here, you're gonna have your arm switch, which will be wired up through the nitrous, and what that's gonna do is that if you hit the nitrous button here to activate it, if that switch is not flipped on, it will not work. So you don't wanna be accidentally driving down the highway, hit the button, and kaboom, you blow your motor to smithereens. You don't want that. Not that it would if you got it tuned up right, but if you have this button flipped on, that activates your button or your foot pedal, however you want to wire it up. So that's an important thing. Here's your air fuel gauge. Like I said, that's going to be your best friend. Make sure to keep that air fuel right where you want it. Anywhere from, I would go 12.8 to 1 to 12 to 1 on the richest side, but 12.5 to 1 is right where you want it. Now let's take a look under the hood at what we've kind of got here. So obviously we got the carburetor there. That is our nitrous plate right there. Now, coming out of the nitrous plate, you've got one line here going to the fuel solenoid. And it's gonna be the same in the back of the plate. You're gonna have one line out coming to the nitrous solenoid. Now, each of these has wires running up through and then back into the cab. And what that does is that's gonna run through that switch to the button, and that's gonna be how you activate your nitrous. Now, a lot of people get very worried about the fuel system. They think, boy, do I need an extra fuel tank or a super high performance fuel pump. If you're out in a pro mod running 500, 600 horsepower worth of nitrous, absolutely. But for your basic kits that you're gonna buy for your street car, for your mild drag and drive car, no, absolutely not. This is just kind of a mildly high performance pump. It's nothing fancy. I think it's a 110 gallon per hour pump, something along those lines. And as you can see here, it goes up into a Y, and that Y feeds the fuel solenoid for the nitrous. And then right in there is going to be where your jet goes. Now, your jets determine how much nitrous, how much horsepower you're going to have. So let me find the jet chart here, and I'll kind of show you guys what I mean. So believe it or not, I seem to have lost the instructions for it. I have them somewhere. I don't know where, but I'm kind of a cluster head. But anyway, so here's your nitrous jets. That's what they look like. Each one of these is stamped with a little number. I don't know if you can see it or not, but it is. It's stamped with a little number. And all you have to do is that on the chart, it'll say if you want to make 100 horsepower, put a 50 jet in the fuel and a 38 jet in the nitrous side. And so all that entails is that you're removing that little hard line right here, and you're going to change the jet where it goes into the nitrous plate, and make sure you have the right jet for the nitrous and the right one for the fuel, as the instructions say. And it's really just that simple. And then boom, you're making 100 horsepower. Maybe you need to go a little faster. You're making 150 horsepower. It's super easy. So that's pretty much the basics of how the nitrous system works on a carbureted application. EFI, it's a little different, but I promise you, it's nothing complicated. Now, when you go online to buy your first nitrous system, you're gonna see some that say wet system, some that say dry system. Now, what does that mean? So a wet system is like what we're running on the truck. One side's nitrous, one fuel solenoid, one nitrous solenoid. It's injecting an equal part nitrous and fuel for your mixture. A dry solenoid, or not solenoid, but a dry system is you only have a nitrous system. That can be injectors into the ports. I don't know if a carburetor plate can be a dry system. I think it's just injectors into the ports. And you're compensating for that extra oxygen with your, you're compensating with that for that extra oxygen in your tune-up, meaning there's no fuel solenoid, you're only spraying nitrous into the engine, and it's on you to make up for that extra oxygen in your tune-up with EFI. I don't believe you can even run a dry system with a carburetor. So that's kind of your basic nitrous 101. Now, a lot of people will say, well, yeah, but my engine can't take nitrous. Well, that's not true. Pretty much any stock engine, any LS guaranteed, pretty much any small block Chevy will take 100 shot of nitrous. As long as you got the tune-up right, it'll do it for a long time. You don't have to worry about it. Just make sure you have that air fuel gauge. Once you start getting up into the 200s, 250 shots, that's when you should probably make sure you have some good parts on it. A good intake manifold. You don't really need a steel crank. It's not necessary. You can run cast crank, cast rods. Forged pistons is great. You want to make sure you have a good set of pistons in it if you're running 250 horsepower worth of nitrous. Any forged piston, doesn't matter if they're cheap or expensive, will handle a 250 shot just fine. Now, the problem with nitrous and why so many people blow up their engines and why you see it in the movies all the time is that it's easy to have it go lean. So when you have your air fuel gauge, you can monitor it all. You make sure it doesn't go lean. When it goes lean, you get detonation. Detonation is when there's not equal parts fuel and air, and your mixture is too lean, and so it ignites early. It doesn't ignite when it's supposed to, and that can damage pistons. It can crack pistons. It can cause all kinds of chaos. So safety measures to take against that. You're going to want to run good gas. If you're going to run over 100 shot, you probably want to put like 100 octane kind of racing gas. They make little octane boosters you can pour into your fuel. You can go to most racetracks sell anything from 91 to 112 race gas. I wouldn't say you need anything above 100 octane. 100 octane is more than sufficient. So that's a really good way to keep it safe. Timing is going to be another big one. For every you'd have to look, when you buy your kit, make sure to look at the instructions, but I believe it's for every 50 horsepower, you retard your timing 3 degrees. So let's say you're running a 50 shot of nitrous and your timing's at 33 degrees normally. You're going to retard that back to 30 degrees, and that's going to be more than safe. Whatever the the instructions with the Nitrous kit recommend. That is going to be a super safe tune-up. It's not going to hurt your motor. As long as you got some decent gas in it, you're going to be good to go. So I know we all like turbochargers and superchargers, big things sticking out of the hood. That's all great. But I really think if you want to make power and you want to go fast down the drag strip, or you want to go out and beat your friends in a race, it's hard to beat Nitrous for the price. My kit, all in, $650. The only extras you might need to get from the kit, maybe a little bit of wiring, a little loom of wiring, maybe a couple connectors. But other than that, and a little bit of rubber hose to make your extra fuel line to go to the solenoid. But other than that, the kit comes complete. It's great. The instructions are really great. I highly recommend Nitrous. And you know what else I highly recommend? I highly recommend subscribing. So if you found yourself enjoying this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps out the channel. So I hope I've kind of given you a little once over on Nitrous. Maybe you learned a little bit, maybe you didn't, but hopefully you'll go out and get it because it is a ton of fun. So hope you guys enjoyed the video, and we'll see you on the next one.